The moment my husband's casket was lowered into the ground, his mother leaned close and whispered, "The building locks change Monday." I thought she was grieving. I was wrong. By Tuesday morning, my keycard bounced at the lobby scanner, my name was scrubbed from the company directory, and security was waiting at the elevator with a box of my things. I had built that firm with my husband for 6 years. I had designed every major project that put it on the map. And standing on that sidewalk in November rain, holding a cardboard box, I heard a voice behind me say quietly, "They just made the biggest mistake of their lives." And I watched the whole thing. I turned around. That was the beginning. My name is Rachel Owens. I'm 32 years old. My husband, Daniel, died 11 weeks ago from a sudden cardiac event. He was 38. No warning, no time to prepare, no chance to say anything that mattered. We had been married 4 years, together for 6. And in that time, we had built Owens plus Reed architecture from a 2-person studio in a borrowed office space into a firm with 17 employees and a client list that included 2 city contracts and a waterfront development deal. That was, at the time of his death, the largest project in our company's history. What I did not know, because Daniel had always handled the family side of things and I had trusted him to, was that his mother and his older brother had been named co-trustees of a family trust that held a 49% ownership stake in the firm. Daniel had told me it was a legacy arrangement, something his father had set up decades ago that had never mattered because Daniel ran everything and nobody interfered. He had told me we would restructure it eventually. We kept saying eventually. Daniel died on a Wednesday. The trust activated automatically. By the following Monday, his mother and his brother were majority decision-makers. Because my stake had been structured as a silent partner arrangement, pending a formal buyout that Daniel and I had been negotiating but never finalized. On paper, I was a minority interest with no voting rights until that buyout closed. On paper, I was manageable. His mother had never liked me. I had understood it as grief over losing her son to someone she hadn't chosen. I had given her grace and distance and time. What I had not understood was that she had been waiting. His brother was quieter about it but aligned completely. He had wanted into the firm for years. Daniel had kept him out because he had no design background and no business sense, just a last name on a trust document. With Daniel gone, the document was all that mattered. I had gone to the office that Tuesday morning because staying in our apartment one more hour would have destroyed me. I needed to work. I needed the drafting table and the project files and the smell of blueprints because grief needs somewhere to go, and mine had nowhere else. My keycard failed on the first try. I assumed a technical glitch. The lobby attendant, a young man I had known for 3 years, looked at the floor when I approached. Security appeared within 90 seconds. They were polite about it. That almost made it worse. The box they handed me contained my personal items from my desk, my drafting pencils, a photo of Daniel and me at the groundbreaking for the waterfront project, a small succulent I had kept on the windowsill for 2 years. 17 employees were somewhere up in that building. Not one of them came down. I stood on the sidewalk and did not cry, because I was so far past crying that I had reached something else entirely. I stood there in the rain and thought, they planned this. The timing of the lock change, the box already packed, security pre-positioned. This was not a reactive decision made by grieving people. This was organized. "They did it before the will clears probate," said the voice behind me, which tells me they know what's in the will, and they want to establish operational control before a judge can weigh in. I turned around. The man standing there was perhaps 45, wearing a coat that cost more than my first month's rent, holding an umbrella he had not extended because it seemed not to occur to him to mind the rain. He was watching the building with an expression I can only describe as professionally interested. "I'm sorry," I said. "Do I know you?" "No," he said. "But I know your work. The Meridian Commons renovation, the harbor transit hub concept that the city shortlisted last spring. You designed both of those." I had. My name was on the filings. Daniel and I had submitted them jointly, but the design direction on both had been mine entirely. "Marcus Hale," he said, and extended his hand. "I run a development group. We have been trying to get a meeting with your firm for 8 months. Your husband's assistant kept redirecting us." I shook his hand because I did not know what else to do. The rain was getting heavier. He finally opened the umbrella. "Why were you redirected?" I asked. "Because we are your husband's firm's primary competitor on the waterfront contract. And because the city is reconsidering the bid structure, which means there is a window right now where an outside design team could re-enter the process." He looked at me directly. "I came here today to try again. Instead, I watched your in-laws have you removed from your own building." I looked back at the glass doors. My keycard was still in my hand. I set it on top of the cardboard box. "What exactly are you proposing?" I said. He said he needed a lead designer immediately. His firm had the financial backing and the contractor relationships but had lost their creative director to a competing offer 3 months ago. The waterfront project required a redesign submission within 60 days if they wanted to re-enter the bid. He had a team and a budget, and no one to drive the design vision. He had come to Owens plus Reed hoping to poach or partner. He had not expected to find me standing on the sidewalk in the rain. I asked him why I should trust a competitor. He said because he had nothing to gain from lying to me today. If I walked away, he found another designer, and his timeline got harder. If I came with him, I gained resources, legal support, and a platform to fight back from. He was not rescuing me. He was clear about that. He was offering a transaction. I was the asset he needed. The circumstances were unfortunate, but the professional logic was sound. I asked what the terms were. He said, "Lead designer on the waterfront project, full creative authority, market rate compensation with a performance bonus tied to the bid outcome." In addition, his firm's legal team would review my ownership situation at Owens plus Reed and advise on options, not as charity. Because if there was any chance I could reclaim my stake, or at least complicate my in-laws' control, a weakened competitor was useful to him. I stood there with my cardboard box and I thought about Daniel saying eventually every time I brought up the buyout paperwork. I thought about his mother at the graveside. I thought about 11 weeks of being a widow and handling funeral arrangements and thank you notes and casseroles from neighbors, and not once, not a single time, had his brother called to ask how I was doing. "I need to speak to your legal team today," I said, "before I agree to anything." He nodded. "My car is around the corner. I want to be honest about what I was feeling in that moment, because I think it matters." I was not relieved. I was not hopeful. I was very angry in the particular way that comes when you realize the grief you have been treating as the whole story was actually only the surface, and underneath it something deliberate had been happening while you were too devastated to notice. That anger was the clearest thing I had felt since Daniel died. I picked up my box and I walked around the corner. His legal team operated out of a floor in a midtown building. I met with a woman named Patricia Strand, senior counsel, who asked me to walk her through the ownership structure from the beginning. I talked for 40 minutes. She took notes without expression. When I finished, she set her pen down and said, "They moved fast because they had to. The will is in probate. If Daniel left you his personal stake, which I assume he did, then once probate closes you have a claim to renegotiate the trust arrangement. They need to establish themselves as operational controllers before that happens, so any disruption to the business can be framed as your interference rather than theirs." I asked how long probate would take. She said 3 to 4 months, depending on any challenges filed. I asked if they could challenge. She said they could try to introduce a dispute about the nature of Daniel's personal stake. They might argue that his personal holdings were commingled with trust assets in ways that complicated inheritance. It would be difficult to prove but possible to litigate long enough to drain resources and leverage. I asked what I could do. She said, "Document everything. Gather evidence of my contributions to the firm's value, client relationships, design credits, correspondence showing my role. File for formal recognition of my ownership interest as a preliminary matter in probate. Contest the lockout as unauthorized use of trust authority. And build an independent income stream so I was not economically dependent on the outcome of litigation I could not control." The last part was where Marcus Hale came in. I spent that first evening in the apartment I had shared with Daniel, pulling together 6 years of documentation. Project files I kept on a personal drive. Emails with clients. Design credits on municipal filings. A detailed spreadsheet of every major decision I had made on every project the firm had completed. I had been meticulous about records my entire career. Daniel used to tease me about it, He said I documented things as though I expected to be audited. I had told him that was exactly the point. I texted my closest colleague, a project manager named Jess, who had been with us since year 2. She responded within minutes. She said the office was strange, that Daniel's brother had been in twice already, that nobody knew what was being decided, and that 3 junior designers had privately asked her whether they should start looking for other positions. I told her to hold on. I told her nothing was settled yet. The first week working with Marcus's team was an education in how differently a firm runs when money is not the constraint. Resources I had fought for at Owens plus Reed for years were simply present. Software licenses, rendering capabilities, consultant access, material sample libraries. I sat in a glass-walled design studio on the 14th floor and began reconstructing the waterfront concept from scratch, using everything I had learned on the original bid, plus everything I now had access to that I hadn't before. I want to be clear that I was not comfortable. I was working through grief in a professional context with people who did not know me, surrounded by tools that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I cried in the bathroom twice in the first week and then went back to the drafting table because the alternative was sitting with the grief and the rage simultaneously, and the drafting table at least gave one of them somewhere to go. Marcus checked in each morning, brief and to the point. He did not ask how I was doing in the way people do when they want a short answer. He asked specific questions about the design, about decisions I had made and why, about where I saw structural risks in the concept. It was the kind of professional engagement I had not had since Daniel. It did not make me feel better. It made me feel useful, which at that point was close enough. Patricia filed the preliminary motion in probate court in the second week. My mother-in-law's attorney responded within 48 hours, which told me they had been expecting it and had counsel on standby. The response argued that my interest in the firm was contingent on the buyout finalization, that no completed transfer of ownership had occurred, and that my presence in the building constituted a potential disruption to an ongoing business under trust administration. They used the word disruption 4 times. I counted. My father-in-law had died when Daniel was in college. I had met him once, at our wedding, in photos. His mother had built her identity around Daniel's success in a way that left no room for the version of that success that included me. I had understood this intellectually. What I had not understood until I read those legal filings was that she had a narrative about the firm that simply did not include me in it. In her version, Daniel had built the business and I had assisted. The filings described me as a design contributor employed by the firm in a collaborative capacity, not a co-founder, a contributor. I pulled out the original articles of incorporation, which I had filed myself. I pulled out the lease agreement for our first studio space, which had my signature on it. I pulled out the business bank account application, where both our names appeared as principals. I sent everything to Patricia and told her to use all of it. Daniel's brother came to see me in the 3rd week. He called first, which surprised me, and I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near Patricia's office because I wanted to be close to counsel if the conversation went somewhere I needed documented. He was 40 years old and had worked in commercial real estate sales most of his adult life. He was not a bad person in the way that some people are not bad people, which is to say he was doing something wrong without fully inhabiting the wrongness of it. He sat across from me and said he was sorry about Daniel. I believed him. Then he said that the situation with the firm was complicated and that his mother was under tremendous stress and that the best outcome for everyone would be if I agreed to a buyout arrangement that reflected my actual contribution level and allowed the business to move forward under clearer leadership. I asked what he considered my actual contribution level to be. He said that was something we could discuss with the right professionals involved. I said that sounded like a conversation I was happy to have once probate closed and my full inheritance interest was formally recognized. His expression shifted. He said waiting that long would be difficult for the business. Clients were asking questions. Staff was unsettled. I said I was aware of that, which was why I was prepared to negotiate a resolution, but any negotiation had to start from the correct baseline, which was that I was a co-founder with an ownership claim pending probate confirmation, not a contributor seeking compensation. He said his mother would not accept that framing. I said his mother's acceptance was not a prerequisite for its being true. He left without finishing his coffee. I sat there for a few minutes and then I texted Patricia and told her what he had said word for word. The design work was going well, And I want to talk about that because it mattered more than I expected. The waterfront project was a mixed-use development on a reclaimed industrial site, 42 acres along the eastern harbor. The original bid from Owens plus Reed had been competent. Looking at it from the outside, I could see what I had compromised in it. I had made choices that reflected the firm's resource limitations and my husband's preference for conservative timelines. Without those constraints, I made different choices. I pushed the residential component further from the waterfront edge and opened a continuous public promenade along the water's full length. I integrated a community arts space that the city had mentioned wanting but that the original bid had treated as optional. I redesigned the transit connection to allow for a future light rail link that the city's own long-range plan had flagged as a priority. When I presented the revised concept to Marcus's full team, the room was quiet for a moment, and then the project director said, "This is significantly better than what the original bid showed." I knew that. It did not feel like a victory. It felt like something Daniel would have been excited about, and the excitement had nowhere to go. Marcus stayed after the others left. He asked how I was doing, and this time the question was not rhetorical. I told him I was functional. He said that was honest. He told me that after his own firm had nearly collapsed 7 years ago due to a partnership dispute, he had worked through it by making something he was proud of, and that it had not fixed the loss, but it had given the energy somewhere to go. I did not tell him that I had already figured that out. I just said I understood. The city issued a request for revised bids in the 5th week. We submitted on deadline. The design package was the best work I had ever put my name on. His mother came to see me on a Saturday morning. I did not know she was coming. She appeared at the door of the apartment that had been Daniel's before it was ours and that remained, technically, part of the estate in probate. She was 64 years old, and she looked as though she had aged 10 years in 11 weeks. And I felt the grief for her that I always had, and then I reminded myself about the legal filings and I opened the door without stepping back. She told me she had not wanted it to go this way. I said it had gone this way because of choices she made. She said Daniel would have wanted the firm protected. I said Daniel would have wanted his wife to be treated as his partner, which was what she had been for 6 years, and that he would have been appalled by the lockout. She told me I did not know what Daniel wanted because I had not known him long enough and she had known him his entire life. I told her that was grief talking, and that I was sorry for her loss, genuinely, but that her grief did not entitle her to my livelihood. She told me she was trying to preserve what Daniel built. I told her that what Daniel built included me, and that the paperwork was going to reflect that, and that the question before us was whether we resolved this in a way that preserved relationships or in a way that preserved nothing but the outcome. She looked at the apartment. She looked at the photo of Daniel and me on the entry table. She said she had wanted Daniel to marry someone from a family she knew. I said I understood that. I told her that I had loved her son with everything I had, and that I had worked alongside him every day for 6 years and built something real with him, and that none of that changed because she had not chosen me. She left without agreeing to anything, but she also did not threaten anything further, and when Patricia followed up with her counsel the following week, the opposing tone had shifted. The word contributor disappeared from their correspondence. The city announced the shortlist 6 weeks after submission. Marcus's firm was on it. The original Owens plus Reed bid was not. His brother called me the afternoon the shortlist was published. He did not say anything for a moment, and then he said, "You took the waterfront project." I said I had not taken anything. I had designed a better proposal for a different firm after being locked out of my own. He said this was going to hurt the business. I said the business had hurt itself. He said he wanted to revisit the buyout conversation. I told him Patricia was available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and that she would need any offer in writing. Jess reached out that same evening. She said things at the firm were not good. 2 clients had asked pointed questions after the shortlist announcement. The junior staff had started leaving. 2 resignations in the past week. His mother had been in the office daily and was making decisions about project direction that she had no qualifications to make. The waterfront contract had been the firm's anchor for 18 months of projections. Without it, the financial position was deteriorating. I asked Jess if she was considering leaving. She said she had a family and a mortgage, and she had been loyal to the firm because of Daniel and because of me, and that what was left did not resemble either of us. I told her to make the decision that was right for her. I told her I would give her a reference that made her career. I told her I was sorry she was in the middle of it. She gave her notice the following week. 12 days later, 4 more staff members followed. The formal buyout offer arrived in the 6th week of probate proceedings. It was low. It was insultingly, deliberately low, structured around the contributor valuation they had originally proposed, and adjusted only slightly upward to signal that they had heard my objection without actually addressing it. Patricia's response was a 12-page document that itemized my contributions to the firm's value across 6 years, cross-referenced against comparable market valuations for design principles at firms of equivalent scale and revenue. It was meticulous. I had spent 3 evenings helping build it. Their counter came 10 days later. It was higher. Still not right, but higher. We were negotiating now, which meant they had accepted the premise. That was the important thing. Probate moved faster than Patricia had predicted. Daniel's will was clear and uncontested. His personal stake in the firm transferred to me. With that confirmed, my ownership position became undeniable. The trust arrangement remained, which meant his mother and his brother still held their 49%, but I now controlled the other 51% as Daniel's heir. I was, on paper and in practice, majority owner. His brother called Patricia directly the day the probate decision was issued. Patricia told me the call lasted 4 minutes. He asked what it would take to reach a final settlement. Patricia told him I was open to a structured buyout of the trust's interest at a fair market valuation. He asked what fair market meant. She told him to have his counsel reach out. It took 3 more weeks. The number we landed on was not the number I had dreamed of in my better moments, but it was a number I could build from. They sold their trust interest. I became the sole owner of Owens plus Reed Architecture. His mother did not reach out. His brother sent a 2-sentence email that was professional and said nothing. I read it once and archived it. I want to say something about what happened with Marcus, because I think it is the part people assume goes one way, and it did not. He and I worked together for 4 months on the waterfront project. I respected him. He respected me. When the bid entered final evaluation, we had dinner to mark the end of the intensive phase, and it was easy in the way that professional relationships are easy when the respect is genuine and the work has been good. He told me he hoped I would consider future projects. I told him I would consider them on their merits. He laughed at that, a real laugh, and said he would expect nothing less. That was the end of it. There was no romance, no dramatic declaration, no convenient conclusion to a personal story. I was still grieving. I was not looking for a replacement for what I had lost. What I had found instead was the proof that I could stand on my own, which was different and in some ways more important. Owens plus Reed reopened with a new team in January. I hired 3 designers from a candidate pool that was, embarrassingly, stronger than anything I had been able to attract before, because the city shortlist had put my name on a different level of professional visibility. Jess came back as operations director. I gave her equity. She cried when I told her. The quiet kind of crying that means something landed exactly where it needed to. The waterfront project was awarded to Marcus's firm in March. My design was in the winning package. The city councilwoman who announced the decision mentioned the promenade concept by name and said it was the element that had distinguished the submission. I was sitting in my office when I read the announcement, and I put the phone down and sat with the window behind me and let myself feel it for a few minutes. All of it, the grief and the work and the year that had happened and the thing that had come out the other side. Daniel's mother sent a card when the announcement ran in the local business press. It was a plain card with a short note. She said she had read about the project. She said she was glad. She did not apologize. I had not expected her to. I kept the card in the desk drawer for a week, and then I moved it to a box with other things I was not ready to throw away and was not ready to look at. Grief does not resolve on a timeline. It reorganizes. It becomes something you work alongside instead of something you are buried under. I was not healed. I was not fixed. I was rebuilt, differently, with different load-bearing walls. What I know now, that I did not know the morning I stood on that sidewalk in the rain, is this. The people who try to take what you have built are usually counting on you being too devastated to fight. They read your grief as incapacity. They mistake your loss for their opportunity. What they cannot account for is the particular clarity that comes when you have nothing left to lose except the thing you refuse to surrender. I was 32 years old, widowed, standing in the rain with a cardboard box. I was also the designer of 2 award-nominated municipal projects with 6 years of professional documentation and the will to use all of it. They saw the widow. They missed the architect. That was their mistake. They made it once. I made sure they would not make it again. If you have ever had someone try to take credit for what you built, or push you out of a room you belonged in, or count on your grief to make you easy to manage, I want you to know what I learned. Document everything, trust your record, and do not wait for someone to hand you back what was always yours. Sometimes you have to walk around the corner and build it again from the beginning. That is not defeat. That is what the other side of betrayal looks like when you refuse to stay down. Comment below if you have ever had to fight for something that should never have been taken in the first place. I read every single one,